Right around the Washington Monument, there's a display. It's a fascinating display, visible from a distance. You can see white flags. The number of them is approaching 700,000, surrounding the Washington Monument, each one of them representing one of the sacred, unrepeatable, infinitely valuable lives that have been lost to the COVID-19 pandemic in the United States. This is tragic, and it has me wondering about other flag displays that we could put up. Those are each represented by white flags, small ones. It looks like snow from a distance. What if we put up little red flags, each representing one of the American lives lost to abortion every year? It would be in the same ballpark, but every single year. Imagine further that you see this roughly 700,000 figure for the lives lost to COVID. That's not just this year, that's last year. It's throughout the duration of this pandemic. What if we could show a red flag for every human life taken since Roe versus Wade was decided in 1973? And let's be really honest about what this was. What this was a decision by the Supreme Court of the United States saying that a state may not exercise its sovereign police powers. Police powers, sort of broad power to protect life, liberty, and property, to protect health, safety, and welfare that state governments have and that the federal government decidedly does not. That the Founding Fathers willfully, intentionally withheld from the federal government because they were too important to be exercised at the national level. The Supreme Court of the United States says no state may protect unborn human life. They decided that in 1973, nearly 50 years ago. If we had a red flag for every human life that's been taken since 1973 and we put that around the Washington Monument, there wouldn't be room enough to hold all those red flags. I doubt there would be enough grass in the entire mall between the Capitol building, the Washington Monument, and the Lincoln Memorial. But unlike snow, it would look like something else from a distance. Looks like something that it is. So let's not dress this up in clinical terms that make it sound like something that it is not. We are talking about the taking of unborn human life, innocent life, life of a being that has a right to exist, life of a being that would cry out in pain if it had the capacity to do so, but we can't hear it. So if a court is going to take that right away, a state whose citizens regard that as being a morally consequential decision. Look, setting aside for a minute questions about exceptions to restrictions on abortion. Before we even get to those, if what we're saying is that a state effectively may not protect unborn human life, and make no mistake, that is what it is. Sure, it underwent some changes nearly 20 years after Roe was decided with Casey. The effect is still essentially the same. We've made what was a state issue involving general police powers for the protection of health, safety, and welfare, something we give to the states, we don't have in the federal government. We made it a federal issue and a federal judicial issue, thus insulating the law from the people, the one thing in our system of government you cannot do. And so, yeah, is Texas's law that they came up with unique? Yes. Is it different than other laws we've seen? Yes, it is. Is this surprising at all that the people of a state who love life would want to protect human life? No, it isn't. And who can blame them? Now, look, I understand not everything that is a good idea in the wisdom of most of the voters in a state or in the wisdom of those they elect to make laws in their state will be constitutional. Yes, the Constitution is counter-democratic in some respects, in that it takes some things outside of the power and authority of the government. Sometimes the federal government, sometimes the states, sometimes both. Abortion is not on that list. I challenge any one of you to tell me what provision of the Constitution uses that term or refers to it directly or indirectly. It cannot be found. No, they fashioned it from whole cloth as if out of thin air. It's wrong. This amounted to a betrayal of their oath to uphold the U.S. Constitution and to interpret it based on what it actually says rather than what they wish they meant. As to the shadow docket, like any court in the United States, state or federal or municipal, yes, the Supreme Court of the United States, where I served as a law clerk, has a motions docket. No court could exist without it. You wouldn't want one without it. And yes, in some circumstances, that motions docket involves emergency motions. To call that a shadow docket, as if to suggest that there's something shady about it or nefarious going on, is an illegitimate attempt to belittle the court, to disparage it, to intimidate it, and to threaten it. This is sometimes what happens in advance of certain people feeling and fearing that members of the Supreme Court of the United States might actually rule in a way that doesn't benefit them, even if it's a ruling in favor of the Constitution. It's not appropriate. It's beneath the dignity of this committee and of the United States Senate. We should not harass, threaten, or intimidate. Finally, with regard to the ruling in this particular case that apparently prompted this hearing, there was no defendant properly before the court. To establish Article III standing and justiciability, one must have an injury, in fact, fairly traceable to the defendant that's capable of being remedied by the court. There was no defendant charged with enforcing this particular statute in that case. So, yeah, I get the fact that for policy reasons, I get the fact that based on your interpretation of the way things should be, some of you believe that the court should have just invalidated the whole law. It's not how our system works. They didn't have jurisdiction because they didn't even have a defendant. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.